Hey, it's Aliana with Brands Are Alive, and in today's video I want to share with you what I do when a piece of content fails, when it doesn't do what I thought it would do or it doesn't perform as well as I thought it would. So I'm going to share with you the 4 components that are necessary to nail really if you want to have a piece of content that works. I'm going to share with you the 5 steps that I use to dissect and analyze why a piece of content didn't work. As a bonus, I'm going to share with you some resources that will help you communicate more clearly, some exercises that will help you kind of clear your thoughts and get to the juice, the bottom of the point that you want to make with your content to make it more impactful. So as a result, what I'm hoping that you'll get from this video is that you'll understand, first of all, the real reason why your content didn't work, so you're not making assumptions, and that you would get better results, obviously, in the future. But the most important thing is I want this to be a less stressful and less confusing and less overwhelming process. And most importantly, to use content creation or marketing in general as a process of healing and self-actualization. All right, so let's dive right into it. So let's talk a little bit about the problem more deeply and how most people try to solve it, how most people approach it. When a piece of content doesn't work, in other words, it doesn't convert or it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, most people jump to conclusions. Myself included in the past, this is exactly what I used to do. So let's say I create a piece of content, I put it out there, or a piece of marketing, I put it out there and it doesn't convert, and I immediately make it mean that either the offer wasn't good or the content itself wasn't good, or worse, that I am not good enough, okay? And I think this is a very common way for us to approach it, say for those of us who are healed and have done, and even then, it's a very human thing. We jump to conclusions and we make it mean that there's something wrong with me. It must mean something about me. And it's usually not a positive conclusion. And the way most people approach it, and the way I used to approach it in the past, is I would look at who is getting the results. I would go, for example, to that one influencer, content creator, expert who is getting the results, and I would look out, okay, what are they doing? Let me study them. Let me see what programs they have. Let me see what classes they have, what coaching programs they have, or maybe they do done-for-you services. Done-for-you services are great. We all know that that's, awesome that you have somebody come in and do things for you, but sometimes you have to do the thing yourself. You want to do the thing yourself, or you simply can't at this time hire somebody to do it for you. In my case, I knew that understanding and nailing content creation was a necessary step, and I wanted to get better at it. I wanted to develop this skill. So I wanted to learn from people. So I, like I said, would dissect, would discern, would try to understand why is this person getting this result and whatnot, and that would lead me to jumping to conclusions. And a lot of people are doing that, making that mistake of jumping to conclusions and making assumptions. So for example, you look at a content creator and you see that they have a lot of likes and whatnot and engagement, and you assume, oh, my content didn't do well because it wasn't engaging enough. So therefore, I need to learn from them how to be more engaging and more exciting and more entertaining and whatnot in my content. Or how do I make it shorter? In my case, what I did, because I had a tendency to talk a lot, I still do. I love, when I'm passionate about something, I can't shut up. I have to apply a lot of discipline just to stop my mind from going in all sorts of directions and branching out and whatnot. It's a work in progress. I've made a lot of progress, but I've had that feedback in the past that you're too passionate, you're too much, you're whatever, years ago, and that led me to have these wounds around showing up boldly because I'm so afraid that I'm going to take up space and make people uncomfortable. So I'm like, I gotta shrink. And when I create the content and it's a bit long and it didn't perform, I assume that the problem is because I'm too bold, too big, talking too much, I am taking up too much space. Let me learn from these people who are like, they create these like micro pieces of content. And to save a long story short, save you time, it didn't work, it's not my style, and it wasn't even the problem, but that was the assumption. So I got this person's process to follow a certain template to templatize my content and make it shorter. And yeah, that wasn't even the issue. But, anyway, I digress. See? But the point is, it leads you to making assumptions about why the thing didn't work. And the crazy thing is, whatever wounds and issues and hurt you have is going to play into the assumptions that you make. So again, if your self-image or if the wound that you have that you're carrying is that you're not good enough, you're going to use that result, that unsuccessful content, as a further evidence to support this idea that I am not good enough. And this is what leads people to blindly following each other and blindly looking at so-called competition and looking at each other and following in their footsteps without really understanding why they're doing it. But they're like, well, that person is getting results, so surely they must have all the answers. And the worst part is that when it doesn't work, when you follow the process, the blueprint, if you will, and it works for other people and it doesn't work for you, you use that as even more evidence against yourself. And you're like, see, I'm such a fuck up that even when I do everything right, things don't work for me. So I want you to take a step back, sit down, grab a glass of water, because I'm going to walk you through the 4 components of what makes a good piece of content that actually works and the 5 steps that I use to dissect why a piece of content didn't work. All right, first things first, you want to identify the goal of the content. You'd be surprised how many people out there don't actually look at the goal. Why am I creating this? They just know that they have to show up and get the word out there or however, right? And it's not like that. You have to know what my goals are in the business, right? Let's say your goal is to build awareness at this stage or get more sales or, whatever goal you have, and you'll have multiple goals in your business. Your marketing should support these different goals. All right. So the goal of every piece, every campaign, every piece of content would be obviously delivering value, of course. And sometimes that's the only agenda you have. You just want to share something with people and you want to help them out and you want to educate, you want to inspire, you want to entertain. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But for most people, when they're creating content marketing or content pieces, there is a goal. For example, conversion or awareness or taking some sort of action. So get clear on that and make it one goal. I always advise to separate your sales content from your value add content, right? What I don't like, this is a personal preference, and I think it gets really weird when I'm reading something and I think you're telling me something that's going to be useful, and then in the end you're like, click here to buy this thing or click here to book a call, because this is the only way that you're going to get any value out of this. After I've invested time and energy, with something, I'm not getting the promise. The answer of the promise is in going through, the coaching program that you have or the course that you have. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying don't do that or don't experiment with it, but I personally have a preference for separating and having just one goal. I've seen some of my clients, sometimes they insist on like having a content piece or marketing. I'm not a content creator by trade. Like that's not my job. Okay. That's not what I do. I'm a marketer. I'm a strategist first and foremost. If you want to put a label on it. I don't really love labels, but that's what I do, right? I do this mostly strategy. And my clients, a lot of times they would come in and be like, well, I want this particular marketing campaign to have this goal and this goal and this goal. It's like, I want it to do this and this and this and this. And I want people to click here, first call to action to take them to this link, second call to action to take them to this link. I'm like, please don't do that. Just have one goal per campaign. Okay, master that, and then we'll worry about the other pieces. So clarify the goal from the campaign. What would mean success, first of all. And the second thing is, every piece of content, you want to break it down into 4 sub-goals. And these are the 4 components I talked about that you have to nail in order to get a quote-unquote successful piece of content. So we mostly think about the meat of the piece of content, the core, right? Like this is the main idea that I want to share in this piece of content. And often we also think about the goal. Like I want to have a call to action for people to convert into buyers. I want them to click and schedule a call. I want them to subscribe to my newsletters. I want them to click here to learn more. That's the kind of the goal of that piece of content. So people think about these 2 things, but what they don't think about a lot of times, and I'm slightly embarrassed to admit that I actually made this mistake too, despite knowing this, I've made this mistake before a few times, many times, is we neglect the other 2 parts, okay? So, which are being seen and having a hook. So to recap, the 4 components for every piece of content, first and foremost, it has to be seen by people. If it's not seen, if people don't see it, it doesn't go anywhere. If you put it out there and it's set on private, it's not published publicly, nobody sees it, it doesn't go anywhere. So it has to be seen. The second stage or second component is it has to hook people or motivate them to consume the piece, unless it's like literally a one-liner, right? But most of the time, whether you're creating a piece of content for, I don't know, for LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, whether it's a video or a post or an image, there has to be, people are scrolling down, right? Like they're just scrolling, and sometimes they have an intent looking for something, sometimes they aren't. But people need to see something that's going to catch their attention, that's going to make them not only see it, but stop and consider, maybe I should watch this. It's a 20-minute video, maybe I should give it a chance, right? And in a context of a video, for example, that means in the first few seconds, you have to give them something which is often referred to as a hook. Tell them what this video is going to do for them. Like, what are you going to get out of watching this whole thing? If it's a long post, a long article, here's what to expect from this whole thing. The worst thing you can do is to be like, today I woke up and I went to the coffee shop and I grabbed a coffee and and then get to the point. Because most people, especially if they don't know you and you haven't built enough emotional capital with them, enough credit, so to speak, enough trust, they aren't going to give you a chance to get to the meat of the content, to actually go through the entire thing. And here, note, you do not have to use any of the unsustainable hook methods. So a lot of people who do understand that they have to hook people, especially when posting on somewhere like social media, they understand that the feed is kind of like a real estate space. I have to, or the social media platform has to choose, right, who to show you, and they're going to prioritize based on engagement. So if I want to engage people, I have to hook them. What's the easiest and fastest and cheapest way to hook people? Well, you can play on people's emotions. So some people use clickbait, some people use sexuality or whatever, their looks to attract attention. Some people use playing on emotions, getting people angry, and us versus them type of thing. Some of these things are more damaging than others. They're not necessarily bad. It doesn't make you a bad person, for example, if you do some of these things. It's just not sustainable, and in the long run, it really backfires. It doesn't work, right? People become desensitized to it. So, that's the second component, the hook. So the most sustainable and best way to hook people in and get them to continue watching is to simply tell them what to expect from this video. Like, here's what I'm going to share with you. Here's what you're going to get as a result of reading this entire long post. So like I said, to recap, be seen. And then the hook, right? So first, it has to be seen. And second, it has to hook people in and encourage them to keep reading or keep watching. And then the third component is the content itself. This is the meat of your content. The goal here is to really find what's the most streamlined way, the simplest way that you can get the point across, okay? At this stage, you really just want to make sure that people are still able to follow logically all the steps, that you're not branching out too much, especially top of the funnel when people don't know you or trust you or aren't engaging enough with you. So you want to make sure that, whatever it is that you promised you're going to cover, you're covering that. Whatever it is that you said in the beginning during the hook, you're actually going to deliver that. It's super important that you keep your promise, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because that's how you build credibility with people. And then finally, the fourth component of a piece of content that's going to work is the call to action. You have got to make it clear, what do you want people to do? If you don't tell them to go click and subscribe to your newsletters, and your goal was to get more newsletter subscribers, you can't really blame them if they don't do it. You can't blame them, period. You can't blame yourself, but you can't be surprised that, why didn't people take action? Because you didn't ask them to. It's easy to make that assumption when you are the creator, that people will know what to do, but you kind of have to say it, you have to spell it out, and you have to keep repeating it over and over and over and over, at the risk of sounding like a broken record. Because there are lots of content creators out there, I'm sure you know, they absolutely you love their content, you watch them, you enjoy what they share, you learn a lot from them, and you still don't necessarily go check out their website. You don't necessarily subscribe to their newsletter. You don't even subscribe to YouTube. You don't follow them on LinkedIn. You don't do any of these things. And it doesn't mean that you aren't a candidate to do that. It's just that they never asked and you never thought about it. All right, now I'm going to take you through the 5 steps that I use to dissect, do like a post-mortem, for lack of better words, of why a piece of content didn't work. So with the understanding of these 4 components that I just talked to you about, now the first step is to look at the piece of content and ask yourself, okay, where did I lose people? In these 4 stages, where am I losing people? Is it that not enough people saw it? Is it that it didn't get enough engagement, although a lot of people saw it? Is it that people saw it and engaged with it but didn't take the action? What actually didn't work here? And it could be one thing, it could be multiple things. But you want to analyze it step by step, all right? So what I see a lot of my clients do and a lot of people do is they go, okay, this piece of content didn't get any engagement. And then you look at the impressions and like 3 people saw it and it got 1 like. Of course it's not going to get a lot of engagement. Not that the engagement is the end goal, but of course it's not going to, because, well, actually that's a great engagement rate. So only 3 people saw it. So then, okay, then we know that the first problem here is that it wasn't seen by enough people. So that your action next time is you want to give it more exposure. You want to be louder, talk to more people, share your content with more people. Don't beat yourself up. Listen, you're going to hear me talk about this so much in this video, in every single video. Never, ever, ever make this mean something about yourself, something negative. Because why? Because when the algorithm, for example, decides that your piece of content shouldn't be shown, as opposed to others, it doesn't mean that your content wasn't good or wasn't engaging. What it means is there is limited space for them, and that's how they see it. You're up against tons of other people who are prioritizing engagement, who have been doing it for years, for decades, who have a lot more in resources. And, the algorithm just decided that their piece is more engaging than yours. It doesn't mean that yours isn't good or helpful or useful or even not engaging. It just means that with the mindset, the way it's created, that was the way it was prioritized. So don't make it mean something about yourself. And here, a lot of times you'll realize, oh, actually, I completely missed some of these steps. So maybe you had content and call to action, but no hook. In that case, you're like, okay, well, I know where I went wrong with this, right? And hook is so important. That piece in the beginning, it's not more important than the content. The content is still the most important thing. The meat of your content is still the core of the value, but the hook is just as important. The title is just as important as what's in the book, because otherwise most people aren't even going to give the content a chance. So anyway, so you want to look at it first. Did I miss any of these 4 components? And if I did all of them, where did I go wrong with this process? Or a better way to ask it is, where did we lose people? Where did people fall through the cracks, right? And take them 1 step at a time. So being seen first. Did enough people see it? Did it get enough engagement? Did people continue, watch the whole video? What's the view time? Did people read the whole post? Sometimes you'll have these metrics, sometimes you won't. So, be kind to yourself. Sometimes you just don't have the answers. And then finally, did people click through? Did people take the action? Did people follow with the call to action at the end of the piece? The next step is to kind of think about what would be the solution to the problem. And this is probably the hardest, and this is the gnarliest piece, right? Because this is where people get their emotions mixed up with this. Here you want to brainstorm solutions instead of thinking about what's wrong with me, what's wrong with the content, what's wrong with the offer, right? So for example, if you're finding that where you're losing people in the process in these 4 components or 4 stages is that, let's say people are viewing it, people are watching a little bit of the video, but they're not finishing. Or they are viewing the content, they see the hook, they read some of it, but they don't get to the call to action. So what are all the possible ways that we can improve this? So essentially you're wanting to take a dispassionate look at the content and dispassionate solution-oriented mind around fixing or solving or improving the content, as opposed to trying to derive meaning. And that means the difference between this content could benefit from being more succinct, more to the point, more engaging, rather than I am not engaging, I am not succinct, I am not good enough. There's something wrong with me, right? And then 1 layer deeper, when you ask, why is this content not engaging? Why is this content not succinct? Why is this content not to the point? Then you take a dispassionate but honest look at yourself and your behavior, and you go, okay, what skills should I learn? What can I improve? How can I grow here? So in my case, it was something like, how can I get to the point faster? How can I make this piece of content easier to digest, easier to understand, more practical, more organized, more structured, but without having to make it so short that I have to gloss over topics, for example, or, do a shallow coverage, or that I would have to script it, which doesn't work for me, okay? Doesn't work for me. Which leads me to the next step here, which is asking the question, what am I willing to change that wouldn't feel like compromising my full self-expression? What am I willing to change? What am I willing to try that wouldn't feel like I'm compromising my authentic and full self-expression? For example, again, using the same example of the piece of content, my style is to be in flow. I like to just talk. I don't want to do the whole scripting, writing all the points, holding a piece of paper, reading it and looking at it. To me, it's too mechanical and I do not like that. I also don't like to be rushed, not just in content, but in life in general. I just kind of have this like very mellow, enjoying, every bit and piece and every second of life. That's how I like to live my life. I like to enjoy things. I like to take my time. I do not like to rush. I don't necessarily thrive in a so-called fast-paced environment. And so for me, the idea of doing a script and trying to get through this whole, topic in 3 seconds or 19 seconds and follow a script and be methodical and too structured and too rigid doesn't work. It doesn't work for me, and I'm not going to enjoy it. Another thing that wouldn't feel like my authentic and full self-expression, that wouldn't be joyful for me, is if I were to play by the algorithm's rules at all costs. Okay, so again, trying to find a happy medium here. Like, you're wanting to say, what am I willing to change that wouldn't feel like a violation of or a compromise on my full self-expression? Am I willing to make my content a little bit shorter and to the point and whatnot? Yes. Am I willing to admit that there is work for me to do in my communication to improve my communication and get my point across more easily and more fluidly? Yes, there's work there to do, and I'm willing to do that. That doesn't feel like a violation of my full self-expression. However, I don't want to do thumbnails where I'm doing a crazy face that is shocked and that is whatever. I had an agency recently. I hired them, great agency. They did a great job with a lot of the things. They convinced me at some point to try these like weird thumbnails. Like, you have to do it. You have to do the crazy face thumbnail. Do it. And I'm like, okay, we'll give it a try. And I just remember feeling, and I told my husband, we were traveling that day, I was like, I'm gonna send this to them and go on a trip, but I don't really feel like this resonates with me, or it doesn't feel right. It's not my expression to do that. And I should have listened to my intuition, but despite everything that I know, and everything that I talk about, I'm not fail-proof. And I did an override on my intuition there, and then I realized, wait, this doesn't feel right. I don't like this. And so I decided that I was never gonna do it again. And the algorithm likes thumbnails with people with crazy faces and like shocked expressions and stuff, but that doesn't feel right for me, so I'm not willing to do that. So you see the difference here? You have to know yourself, and don't be afraid to try a few things, right? But you have to know for yourself. Sometimes there are things that the algorithm wants, or that audiences want, or that the market wants, that you don't want to do, and it doesn't feel right for you. And it's not because it's morally wrong or anything, but you just don't want to do it. And that's okay. You have to be true to yourself, but don't be so stubborn that you're also not willing to listen and take some feedback. All right, and then as a fifth and last step in this process is, once I've worked through all of that, I like to go back to what were some of the negative thoughts that came up in the process of creating this content. You remember how I said, you make it mean something about yourself or about your content, that it's not good enough or you're not good enough or whatever. Note those things. The goal is not just to not listen to them. The goal is not just to not act on them, but to work through them. So in this step, I figure out what popped up for me in the process of creating, what painful thoughts, ideas, and emotions came up, and whether I work through them immediately on the spot or keep them somewhere that I know I'm going to go back and work through them. But they have to be worked through, because these are sitting there in the back of your mind. They're taking up space, they're draining your energy, they're affecting you in many ways that you're probably not aware of, and you should work through them, and it's just the right thing to do by yourself. So the bottom line of this whole video can be summarized as simple as, it's not just looking at your metrics or results that helps you analyze and use the feedback to make improvements. The most important thing is to be able to take a dispassionate look and separate the emotion from the thought and the assumptions. And instead of making it mean something about yourself, or instead of making it mean something about your offer, your content, or instead of making assumptions as to what the solution should be or what you should do next to fix it, really, put on your scientist hat and try to understand what's truly going on and get to the truth, get to the bottom of what's actually happening and see it for what it is. And sometimes it means that you have to work on yourself and improve your skills. Sometimes it means that there's something you have to learn, basically. And sometimes it means that, there's a missing component there, but never, ever, ever, ever make it mean something about yourself, especially not a negative thing. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting there, spinning your wheels and just feeling not so great. All right. So I just wanted you to be aware of the power of observation without judgment. It's a skill that can help you in many areas of your life, and content creation and marketing is no exception. That was it for this video. My name is Aliana, again with Brands Are Alive. If you enjoyed this video, if you're watching it anywhere other than through the newsletters, make sure to go to brandsarealive.com/newsletters and subscribe to the Saturday Mojo, which is our newsletters. We send one video like this per week. And if you're curious, you can go to brandsarealive.com to learn more about what we do. We help conscious creators like you build brands of full self-expression and a business that makes you feel alive. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.